Thanks for tuning in to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. You know, Brian, we're going to talk about one of those things in soil tests that some people say really isn't that important, but I think they're missing the boat. We're going to talk about cation exchange capacity today.
Well, one thing I think just about everybody can agree on is we need to reduce erosion in the United States if we want to have a better long-term future on the farm. We're going to talk about erosion today and even just how some of the subtle things you do on your farm can make a big difference with erosion reduction.
Well, we've got a very difficult to control weed of the week depending on which crop you're raising. We'll explain later in the show. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we wanted to talk a little about perennial plants and managing them in the fall. Like, for example, lawns, Darren, or alfalfa. I mean, those are perennial plants. We really shouldn't have to do anything with them. They're just going to survive through the winter, aren't they?
Well, unfortunately, that's what a lot of people think. And you look at lawns this year, and they went brown early in the year in much of the country, and really they stayed brown all summer. And guys say, well, I should be fine, right? That'll grow again next year. That's perennial grass. It is a perennial. However, if you completely starve it and it has no moisture and no food for a whole summer, you're probably going to have to do some reseeding, at least in parts of your lawn.
Okay, but should I fertilize right now this fall, Darren, on my lawn?
It's getting pretty late for lawn fertilizer, and we run into trouble, you know, with perennial plants. A lot of times people think, well, I just need enough food to get through the winter, and that's true. They do need food, but they need it a little earlier than now.
Well, it depends on where you're at in the country, though. So if you're in Arkansas, for example, this might be a good time, but if you're in North Dakota, you're too late. Why are you too late?
Well, because winter is right around the corner, and you can't throw a whole bunch of food at a plant when it doesn't really have time to take it in and digest it and use it and move it down into the root system. You end up with issues when you have lots of nutrients on the surface of the soil. You're more prone to having some leach away or move away with water or snow melt. Also, you're more prone to having disease issues show up like snow mold in your lawn. So you don't want to fertilize too late in the year. But you know, with perennials, like you say, they're going to grow for multiple years, so you have to treat them as such. Don't just assume they're going to keep living. The same in your flower beds. If you've got some perennial plants, hey, some of them are very sensitive to cold, and you may have to cover them up over the winter. At least you kept it out of the 20 below and moderated that temperature somewhat so it would survive.
Okay, let's talk about a crop, alfalfa. It's a perennial, it's going to survive, right? But there are a lot of farmers who will cut that alfalfa late in the year just to get some extra tonnage off the field. What ends up happening if you cut that alfalfa low late in the season?
Well, you need to have some growth out there to try and take in some nutrients, take in some photosynthesis, because you need that energy to keep your plant surviving through the year. And people say, well, yeah, my alfalfa, it's a perennial, it'll survive. Most of it will, but some of it dies off every winter. That's why after a few years, we have to tear out fields or burn them off and start over again because our stand gets too thin. There's not enough plants per square foot. So every year, if you want to keep more plants alive, you've got to give it a little bit of time in the fall to regrow, gain its strength back, and then you don't have quite as much winter kill.
Well, once again, with perennial plants, in the fall, there is some level of management that a person needs to do in order to maximize that stand come next spring. Otherwise, even perennial plants can die off during the winter.
Well, one of those perennial plants may just be our weed of the week. We'll show you what it is coming up later in the show.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seeds so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
Back in 1966, Advanced Drainage Systems, Inc. was the first company to start manufacturing plastic agricultural drainage pipe in the United States. And today, ADS continues our leadership with superior pipe production and service capabilities. Our roots are firmly entrenched in the agriculture industry, and we're committed to helping farmers grow their business. With 54 manufacturing plants and 24 distribution yards throughout the world, you can count on ADS and our green striped pipe to be there when you need us. Advanced Drainage Systems, the green striped pipe you can count on.
You can't fill a barrel any fuller than its lowest stave, and your crops can't do any better than the nutrient that's in shortest supply. Your yield potential is only as good as the weakest nutrient in your fertilizer program. Give your crops more than just NPK. Prescription apply all the micronutrients your crop needs, each one customized for your crop's potential. MicroLink, linking yield to potential.
Harvest season will soon be over, but don't put away your equipment until you bring it into Titan Machinery, your Case IH dealer. Take advantage of our Uptime Maintenance program. Uptime is Titan's preventative maintenance service designed to eliminate costly downtime during the short working season. Our technicians average more than 10 years of experience and use a comprehensive checklist to find problems before they slow you down. Call Titan Machinery today to schedule your Uptime service so you can spend the winter worry-free. Titan Machinery and Case IH. Better solutions.
Everything is better to the power of Nutrisphere N. Proven to shield against leaching, volatilization, and denitrification, Nutrisphere N Nitrogen Fertilizer Manager helps you maximize the efficiency of your nitrogen applications. In fact, research shows that in 184 corn trials, Nutrisphere N increases yields by an average of 13.2 bushels per acre. Do the math for yourself. Contact your local fertilizer dealer today and take your operation to the power of Nutrisphere N.
Cation exchange capacity, or CEC, we'll often call it for short. It's one of the most important things you can get on your soil test. Let's start by explaining what is cation exchange capacity.
Well, cation exchange capacity tells you what the holding capacity of your soil is. Its ability to hold nutrients, its ability to hold water, perhaps even tie up some residual chemicals, all those things. When you have a higher CEC, your soil can just hold more. And when you have a lower CEC, then you can't hold as much. So you have to manage those soils completely differently. Okay, so this cation exchange capacity, the reading will come in a number, and just to give you a rough idea of what it means, if you've got a cation exchange capacity or CEC of less than 10, you've got a sandier soil. If you've got a cation exchange capacity of 10 to 20, we would kind of consider that a medium soil, and anything over 20 would be a heavy soil. Now sometimes if, let's say, you've got peat or muck soils, you might have a cation exchange capacity of 35 or 40. That's a tremendous heavy soil, and obviously then it can hold a lot of water and a lot of nutrients. Well, when we look at cation exchange capacity, it doesn't exactly tell us how many nutrients are out in our field. And there's a lot of confusion in the industry about, well, you don't really need cation exchange capacity. It doesn't tell you exactly how much nitrogen's out there or how much phosphorus is out there. No, it doesn't. But it gives us a good idea of what those soils can hold. And the reason we want to know this is because we don't want to over apply or apply fertilizer that may potentially leach away. So we don't want to have issues out in our field. It's important for us to know what can our soils hold before we apply anything. Yeah, so this doesn't tell you how many nutrients are out there. What it is a measurement of is the type of clay, the amount of clay, and the amount of organic matter in your soil. So in other words, if you have the right type of clay, you have lots of it, and you have lots of organic matter, you're going to have a higher cation exchange capacity number and in effect a heavier soil. Okay, so let's talk, Darren, about what can we use cation exchange capacity for specifically on the farm? Well, when we think about the holding capacity of the soil, it's most critical when you're looking at leachable nutrients. How many of those leachable nutrients, ones that could potentially be subject to moving away from your field if you over apply, well, how much of those can you apply to your soil? So in other words, nitrogen, sulfur, boron, those are the ones that we talk about most often when we're considering leachable nutrients. For that matter, even chloride, although that's not a real big deal. And another thing that people don't really think about too much is salt. Salt's actually leachable, but you know what? I really don't want to hold that in my soil anyway. I don't want to hold the salt either, but I do want to hold nitrogen, and especially if you're raising a crop like corn or wheat, we're putting quite a bit of nitrogen out in those fields because the plants need that in order to raise the grain. So when we're looking at nitrogen recommendations, here's where we start with cation exchange capacity. Let's just say your cation exchange capacity is 15 for your field. If you're going to apply nitrogen to that field, we say it's safe to apply about 10 times your cation exchange capacity if your soil has no nitrogen out there already. Yeah, so let's not get this misunderstood here. At the most, we believe that a soil can hold about 10 times what the cation exchange capacity number is. So 10 times 15 is 150 total pounds. If you already had 50 pounds in the soil, you should only apply a maximum of 100 pounds out there. And one of the biggest problems we end up with across the country and really across the world is farmers don't know their cation exchange capacity number, and then
then as their crop yields go up, 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 up every year, they just put on more nitrogen, more nitrogen, more nitrogen, and figure, I'm sure my soil will hold it. I don't know, I got pretty heavy ground. I think it'll be okay.
And the other thing is, I want to put this all on in one time. I don't want to have to come back twice. So you had that 15 cation exchange capacity. Your soil can only hold 150 pounds of nitrogen, but you need 200 pounds to raise that corn crop that you want to raise. Some farmers say, you know what, I just have to put that 200 all on at the same time and take my chances because I just don't have time to come back. That's the wrong answer. We need to spoon feed that crop. We need to put it on a couple different times. Maybe we put 100 pounds on the first time and 100 pounds on later on in the season after that corn crop has used up some of the nitrogen. If we do it that way, we can manage that nitrogen safely, we can maximize our efficiency with the nitrogen, we can avoid having problems. Now, some people say, well, why don't we just take a shortcut? How about I just use one of these nitrogen stabilizer products, or I'll use a controlled release product. You know, those things can work and they certainly help things, but if you're going to put more nitrogen out than your soils can hold, you're really taking some risk there. Yes, you may have a controlled release product, but when is it going to release that nitrogen? Maybe weather conditions, rainfall conditions, everything are ideal, and that product breaks down a little quicker than you'd like it to, or faster than your crop is growing. You could have some issues there. And with nitrogen stabilizer products, yes, it's nice that they hold nitrogen in the ammonium form longer, because the ammonium form of nitrogen has a positive electrical charge, and that will hold in your soil longer. But still, there's only so much your soil can hold at one time. Don't take those chances. Don't put yourself in a position where you are subject to leaching. Pay attention to what that cation exchange capacity is when you're thinking about nitrogen applications.
Okay, when we're talking about cation exchange capacity here, you know, very often on Ag PhD, we're recommending certain things to you. We're advising you to consider this, try that. With cation exchange capacity, this is something that we're going to tell you flat out. You have to know this as a farmer in this country. If you're not going to know this, we're going to end up with major problems. Let me just give you an example from another country around the world. Darren and I went to Denmark last summer, and for many years, farmers didn't know their cation exchange capacity. So what do you think they did? As their yields continued to go higher, they just applied more and more nitrogen. Well, the soils wouldn't hold it. Where did the nitrogen go? The nitrate ended up down in the water, and after a while, city people don't like it when we put nitrate in their water, and they said, no, that's enough. We're going to limit every farmer in the country. They can only use X amount of nitrogen, that's it. So today, even if a farmer uses all the best management practices, he uses a nitrogen stabilizer, he split applies his nitrogen, he is so ridiculously careful there's no chance of loss, it doesn't make any difference, he's capped on how much nitrogen he can use. Is that what you want for your farm? Guys, that's where we're headed right now if we don't do a better job managing nitrogen on the farm, and it all starts with you have to know your cation exchange capacity. It's a simple test, it'll cost you maybe 10 or 15 bucks to find out. Just find it out on every field you farm. There's no excuse not to know what your CEC number is. Well, cation exchange capacity is extremely important on the farm, but so is weed control. You have to know how to control this particular weed, and it is a tough one. We'll talk about it later in the show.
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
Hey Brian, it's Farm Guy.
What brings you to our farm?
I watch Ag PhD every week and know that you guys do a lot of field testing.
We test a lot of products here, and when something works, we use it on our farm.
Oh, like agriculture liquid fertilizers. You guys started talking about ProGerminator and SureK on the show a few years ago.
But I was skeptical.
You're always skeptical.
Should Brian be skeptical of agro-liquid fertilizers? Find out at www.farmguytv.com.
Speed, strength, and efficiency make Capello corn heads a head above the rest. Built with polymer components that exceed industry standards, Capello corn heads continue to push the boundaries for maximizing grain retention while using less energy. Visit CapelloUSA.com and learn more about Capello's state-of-the-art chopping technology that cuts cleaner, allowing your horsepower to remain where it belongs, with your combine, so you can harvest faster in all weather conditions. Add to that an amazing folding feature, and it's clear to see why Capello is a head above the rest.
Case IH set the standard for improving power and fuel economy with SCR technology, while others were still trying to decide what the standard was. Only efficient power from Case IH is proven in the field 10,000 times over. And you'll find it in all our high horsepower equipment, from tractors to combines to sprayers. The world of farming is changing. Will you be ready?
I'm ready.
To learn more about how you can be ready with a proven leader, visit caseih.com/efficientpower.
For lower costs and higher production, see your Mandaco dealer. Ask about the best production-built land roller on the market. Mandaco, simple design for easy transport and easy use. 12 to 62 foot widths, heavy-duty 4x8 by 3/8 inch tube frame, and now available with a steerable wing wheel. Mandaco land rollers. Improved soil to seed contact, faster, more uniform germination, less moisture loss. Eliminate downtime due to rocks. See your Mandaco dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call 877-915-8790.
I was talking to a farmer in Minnesota this summer, and he was in his 70s, and he said, you know, Darren, he goes, there's one thing. He said, if I could change one thing over my farming career, I'd have much more focus on soil erosion. He said, I just can't believe the difference from when I was a kid to now. You know, we used to do so much tillage and so much deep tillage every year. We just lost so much of our topsoil over my farming career. He said, if I could change anything, that would be it.
Yeah, but you know, Darren, they didn't have a lot of options back then. I look at our grandpa and he put some terraces into a couple of fields where I'm just going, what do you need terraces there for? But then I got to thinking, you know, the only way he had to control weeds was either by hand, which wasn't very good, or tillage, and actually he was, I'm sure, using both methods. But the point is he had to do tillage to reduce bug populations, to dramatically reduce weed populations, to get the soil ready to seed. They didn't have as good of equipment back then to just go in and no-till, or, I mean, there was no strip-till equipment or anything like that. So that was about all they were left with. Thank goodness that we've made some advances over the years, so we don't have to use tillage. I mean, you certainly can, but you don't have to use tillage now in all cases. So in a couple of these fields where we don't have a lot of slope, but Grandpa put terraces in, I have no issue tearing them out, because with modern farming today and strip till or even no-till, we can just about completely eliminate the erosion there, and we don't even need the terraces. Now, I'm not saying pull all terraces out. I'm saying on almost flat ground, terraces aren't really needed that much when you're reducing tillage.
Well, hold on there, Brian. You're going to create a firestorm here, and you're taking away some of my thunder. You know, when we think about erosion, there's really two primary means of erosion that we're concerned about, and that's wind erosion and water erosion. And when we're thinking about water erosion, I've got a field that's got some terraces, Brian. I wish they would have been put in 30 years earlier and saved even more
You
topsoil.
have a lot more slope though on that particular field, and that's the whole thing. And with this erosion, one of the things that I've been trying to help people understand is when you look at your soils, it's not just about the dirt loss. You say, oh yeah, I lose a little bit of dirt, I can move it back, whatever, it's no huge deal. But what I want you to think about is that top inch, that top half inch, that is the richest soil you've got. It's usually very high in organic matter, it's extremely high in plant nutrients, and if that goes down the hill through wind or rain, you just lost a whole bunch of money.
Well, you certainly lost money, but you lost time too. And you think about how long it takes to build soils back up. Wow, I've got some ground where there's no topsoil left on the hilltops, and you just can't build that back overnight. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to do
Sure
that.
You can, Darren. A mere 20 to 40 years and you'll have that soil built back up.
That's what I mean. You can't do it overnight. And so you got to think about those things. So for me, when I think about soil erosion on my hilly ground, I'm concerned about tillage. I'm going to do much less tillage than has ever been done before on that ground. We can get by with no-till or strip-till. Now, if you need just a little bit of tillage to make things work out for your system, I think strip-till is a great way to go. But no-till can certainly be managed as well. When you think about wind erosion off those hilltops, we've got to leave some residue out there. Now, you can leave corn stalks, for example, or wheat stubble standing tall, or with corn stalks, for example, some guys say, well, I can't manage it when I've got those great big chunks that may fall over on my row and now I can't cut them and move them out of the way. We like to use a chopping corn head.
Anyway, the reason why we're talking about this today is because you go back to the 1930s, really dry years, and then
kind of like this year.
Right, and then as farmers, we started putting in all these trees all over the country to help reduce that wind erosion. Okay, we have no-till practices or strip-till practices today, different than what we did back then. We're never going back to the Dust Bowl era, never gonna happen again, okay? But there are a lot of trees that are coming out all around the country. That's fine if you wanna tear some trees out, But let's just keep in mind, now you don't have that windbreak that you had before. You've got to do something else out in your field. And especially when you're in the northern part of the country, let's say you're in North Dakota and you're doing full-scale tillage, you're tearing all the trees out, now you are setting yourself up for a lot more wind erosion than what you've had in the past. So I just want you to keep this in mind, and maybe somehow, some way, you need to be reducing some tillage. I know there are a lot of people that are doing just light tillage. They're going over the top with a Salford machine or some type of Coulter machine to just kind of chop things up a little bit, leave a lot of residue out there. That's certainly better than plowing when we're talking about reducing erosion. But what I would also want you to consider is maybe do some strip till instead of doing full-scale tillage again in the spring.
Well, those things are great, Brian, but you didn't even talk about drainage tile. If we improve drainage on our farm with subsurface drainage tile, studies have shown erosion reductions of 40 to 60%. That's huge, and it's a good thing for soil erosion, but it doesn't help us stop our weed of the week. If you've got this tough weed, we'll show you how to control it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Mandaco.
For lower costs and higher production, Mandaco leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. See your Mandaco dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call 877-915-8790.
All right, Darren, we got one of the toughest weeds we've ever had on Ag PhD. It is Foxtail Barley. It's a perennial weed. How are we going to stop this thing?
Okay, you say toughest weeds we've ever had. It is tough if it's out in your wheat. If it's in some corn or soybean ground where I can plant a Roundup ready crop and use high rates of Roundup, I'm not nearly as worried about it. But in wheat, yeah, it's a pretty difficult one to kill.
Well, a lot of people will confuse it too for quackgrass because it does have auricles. It is a perennial, so it looks kind of similar to quackgrass. About the only way you can tell the difference, just pull those roots up. It doesn't have nearly as extensive a root system as what quackgrass does, but it is still a perennial weed.
It is, and when you look at the seed head on it, it's kind of feathery and soft, and it looks kind of pretty out there. You see this little patch of feathers out in your grass. Well, you say, oh, that's not too bad a deal, but when it spreads out into your field, it sure can be. So let's talk about wheat. Now, there's a lot of different grass herbicides for wheat, but unfortunately, not very many of them work well on Foxtail Barley.
Well, I would go so far as to say none of them work 100%. What we strongly encourage you to do is get a good burn down. If you get a good burn down with Roundup before your wheat emerges, you've got a big head start on that Foxtail Barley, and it's a lot easier to control later on in the season. But I would also recommend that you put down some Prepare as a pre-emerge residual herbicide. Yeah, it's not going to control a lot of the Foxtail Barley, but it's really going to slow it down, and it is going to kill some of it, so it'll thin those populations out. So Roundup, Prepare, pre-emerge.
Well, in crop, the two best products I've found have been Gold Sky and PowerFlex. Now, PowerFlex, if you can use it in the fall and winter wheat, that's awesome. It's not going to be 100%, as Brian said, but it's going to be the best thing going. And Gold Sky in the spring has been one of the better ones that I've seen. Good suppression for sure. Maybe control if it's a new seedling kind of patch.
I don't know if I'd call it control. Also, I don't think Maverick is too bad. And then another one that is okay would be Everest in combination with Express. If you just go out with Everest, probably not going to do it. Put some Express with it. That'll help heat it up just a little bit, make it a little bit better. Is it going to be 100%? No way. 80%? Probably.
Well, again, Foxtail Barley is a perennial weed, so none of the grass killers in soybeans are going to take it out 100%. So you got to use Roundup in a Roundup ready crop situation to do a good job. Same thing for corn. If you're using Accent or Steadfast in crop, not good enough. But if you have Roundup ready corn, you can use Roundup and do a nice job.
The only thing in corn though, Darren, is you may not be able to use a high enough rate of Roundup in order to stop this thing completely. You probably burn it back significantly though, so it most likely won't become competitive after that point. Well, once again, our Weed of the Week is Foxtail Barley. Do what you can to control it on your farm. That's it for our Weed of the Week, but stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The world of farming is changing. From the power and versatility of Steiger and Magnum tractors to the legendary reliability of axial flow combines, Case IH can help you be ready. To learn more, visit caseih.com/be ready.
Whether you're using a wing tip trying to do some deep ripping or you're using a straight point just trying to slice through compaction, the important thing is figuring out exactly at what depth you need to be. So we'll give you a couple of tips on today's Iron Talk. There are a number of ways you can determine where your compaction layer is at. One would be to dig a post hole down and reach your arm down in the post hole and pull up with a knife. Once you hit that layer of compaction, just measure down to that. And typically we like to set a point, whether we're trying to rip the ground or just slice through the compaction with a straight tip. We like to be about an inch below where that compaction layer is at. So let's just say you have a hard compaction layer at 8 inches. It really doesn't matter if you're at 9 inches or 12 inches. If your compaction's at 8, well, there's no point running any deeper than about 9 inches as you move through the field. Now, you just need to check across your field in a few different spots to see if that layer's at about the same point or if it varies throughout the field. Chances are all your operations you were doing, we're going to leave compaction at about the same point. So just set your point down an inch below where that compaction layer is and rip away. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
It takes a whole team of people to record a song. Hey everybody, I'm Steve Azar, singer, songwriter, and recording artist. I'd like you to meet Mike Larson, an attorney at Swenson Investments and Commodities.
Like recording a hit country song, it takes a team to put together a good farm estate plan. I work with you, your attorneys, your bankers, and your advisors. What are my chances of touring with you?
About as good as growing a head of hair. Call Mike Larson at Swenson Investments and Commodities.
With Roundup Ready Plus weed management solutions, the pluses really add up. You can count on expert advice, herbicide recommendations, plus weed control incentives for your higher-yielding seeds and advanced traits. With Roundup Ready Plus and Genuity Roundup Ready-to-Yield soybeans, you have the solutions you need to effectively subtract your weed problems. And that adds up to yield. For more details, visit RoundupReadyPlus.com.
Back in 1966, Advanced Drainage Systems, Inc. was the first company to start manufacturing plastic agricultural drainage pipe in the United States. And today, ADS continues our leadership with superior pipe production and service capabilities. Our roots are firmly entrenched in the agriculture industry, and we're committed to helping farmers grow their business. With 54 manufacturing plants and 24 distribution yards throughout the world, you can count on ADS and our green striped pipe to be there when you need us. Advanced Drainage Systems, the green striped pipe you can count on.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seeds so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
Case IH set the standard for improving power and fuel economy with SCR technology, while others were still trying to decide what the standard was. Only efficient power from Case IH is proven in the field 10,000 times over. And you'll find it in all our high horsepower equipment, from tractors to combines to sprayers. The world of farming is changing. Will you be ready?
I'm ready.
To learn more about how you can be ready with a proven leader, visit caseih.com/efficientpower.
Everything is better to the power of NutriSphere N. Proven to shield against leaching, volatilization, and denitrification, NutriSphere N Nitrogen Fertilizer Manager helps you maximize the efficiency of your nitrogen applications. In fact, research shows that in 184 corn trials, NutriSphere N increases yields by an average of 13.2 bushels per acre. Do the math for yourself. Contact your local fertilizer dealer today and take your operation to the power of NutriSphere N.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
Introducing the all-new Backsaver Swing Hopper Auger Mover. Backsavers have interchangeable parts which allows you easy access to move or swing your augers to fit your harvesting needs. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but be sure to join us again next time for another Iron Talk, Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, and a whole lot more. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Subsurface drainage tile is used around your home and in farmers' fields to remove excess water safely. As water filters down through several feet of soil, it is purified naturally. To learn more about clean water leaving farm fields, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.